panelists.
I want to welcome everybody to our forum. This is our second virtual forum. I want to thank all the conference planning committee members. Their thoughtful work in putting this conference together could not be more timely in terms of the issues related to the topic here, evictions after moratoriums, which is right where we are. Today we have a group of experts who will share issues from the bench, from the issues from landlords, tenants, and those vitally affected in their communities. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Phil Starr, who is a long-time advocate and very knowledgeable about landlord-tenant law. So start it out, Phil.
Thank you, Chip, and I'd like to thank all our panelists who agreed to share their time and expertise today. We have a lot of panelists because the idea today was to try to give a brief overview of sort of where we are today, what types of responses are happening, what people are seeing as kind of needs that are coming up, and what are some of the legislative efforts that are trying to deal with the situation. There's been a lot of news reports that have talked about the fact that we may be facing an eviction tsunami. Two events that are occurring that have caused a lot of concern are that the federal moratorium on evictions, which people have estimated may affect about a third of properties, ended on July 25th. There's been some conversation that it could be extended, but so far nothing's happened. And the $600 a week supplemental unemployment compensation also will end, I believe, this Friday unless some action is taken. It appears that so far there's not agreement on moving forward on that. I'm sure most people are aware that of the discussions around that. So given the fact that what are we really facing? It's interesting that the Supreme Court of Ohio impaneled a process in which they have put together a very extensive report about evictions because of their concern. And they state in their report, considering that the first quarter of each year typically is the annual season trough in the volume of new eviction cases, and that the number of filings in April were down 75% over the first quarter average, typically the smallest quarterly volume each year, it's clear that Ohio's courts will experience an unprecedented surge in the number of new eviction cases being filed over the coming weeks and months. The U.S. Census Bureau does a thing which they call the Pulse Survey, in which they take a weekly kind of reading about various indicators. And one of the things that they look at is people's ability. They ask people to answer to their ability to pay next month's rent. And in the week of July 16th to July 21st, of the 1,900,000 renters in Ohio, 358,000 said they had no confidence that they could pay their next month's rent, and 315,000 said they had a slight confidence, which is about just under 700,000 renters in the state of Ohio, which is about 35% of the rental population. So it appears that we could have a significant problem. So far, the filings that the Supreme Court was able to document have been down. Local evidence there has not been significant increase in evictions, but I think we're going to hear today about the number of calls that are coming in to 211 for help, how we're responding through money that has been provided, how we're trying to assist tenants, and then how landlords are responding to the crisis. And then we'll hear on the legislative front from representatives from both Sherrod Brown's and Senator Portman's offices about legislation that has been proposed to try to address some of these problems on a much larger scale. So we're going to start with a presentation from United Way's 211 that collects data as to the types of community needs, but more importantly, they are the main kind of door for referrals for people who are having problem with paying their rent or utilities or need food or things like that. And they make the referrals over to the Cleveland Housing Network, which is coordinating the funds that are available for evictions. So today we have two representatives from 211, Louise and Matt. So I'll turn it over. I guess, Louise, are you going to start?
Hey, this is Matt. I'm just
Okay,
gonna
Matt Finley. Okay.
kick it off. Yeah. Hey, I'm Matt Finley. I'm the associate director of the 211 for Cuyahoga County here, and I just wanted to give kind of an overview of, briefly 211, but just talk very quickly about just our general experience with the COVID-19 outbreak and what's been going on during the pandemic. And then I have Louise Forsman with me. She's one of the professionals who updates our resource database. She's also kind of our resident housing expert. And so I really wanted to give her the opportunity to really sort of delve into some of those housing specific concerns. So for those who don't know, 211, it's an easy 3-digit number. We also have a website, 211oh.org, where people can chat, but community members can reach out. And as was just sort of described, we perform community resource navigation. We have an extensive database of local programs that offer services for things like utility help, food, housing assistance, legal assistance, and then also just listing city services, healthcare services, things like that. So as you can imagine, starting around March, we really started seeing our call volumes just sort of skyrocket around COVID. Specifically, to give you some sense, this March we talked to about 15,000 individuals, whereas the March of 2019, we only talked about 12,000. And actually, specifically, talking about needs during that period, a request for food actually tripled from what we normally saw. And that was kind of the largest increase during the first month in April, as kind of more rumors and things started coming out about stimulus checks and the CARES Act. That's where we really started to see those increases. And then actually May really settled down. Of course, part of that I think is because there was the moratorium on evictions as well as on utility shutoffs. And then it's been recently, within the last month to month and a half, I think, since some of that CARES Act funding's come through, since we've seen things like Cleveland Housing Network's rental assistance program launch and Right to Counsel begin, that our numbers really have started to spike again, especially around that housing area and also around utilities. As we know, there's more talk about the utility companies potentially starting shutdowns again. So with all of that kind of in consideration and kind of that general intro to where we're at, I'll let Louise talk a little more specifically around especially what we've been hearing from tenants, what we've been hearing from homeowners, and I'll also be sticking around for the Q&A after. But thank you, and this is Louise Forsman.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, what you're seeing in front of you is something that anybody can pull up on 211oh.org's website. This is a report for the first 6 months of this year for Cuyahoga County of all the needs. If you pull it up on your own, you can hover over these areas and see what some of the met needs were, the unmet needs. It goes into a lot of specifics. You can probably see with the housing, that's the second biggest unmet need for that 6 months category. So if you want to go to the next chart, this is just housing needs. Now we're talking about needs with 211. Needs are the calls that we're getting that are asking for these services. Down below are the actual individual referrals we're making for those services. For 211, well, you can see it's pretty clear here that the housing needs are going way up. And in fact, to just point out, you can see this rent payment assistance double what it was last year during this period of time. And I'm actually gonna, when I'm done showing the ones for the first 6 months, I've just run a July report because the month is almost over and things have changed appreciably. So to mention, the needs in 2019 A lot of these are roughly parallel, just like as Matt said, you can see the effect of the moratoriums on things like gas and utilities and so forth, all the other utilities. Actually, normally during this time period, we'd be having a much higher referral for things like gas payment assistance. It was down this year because of the moratoriums, but also the winter time is when that federal HEAP money is available for utilities. We didn't see evictions, as you can see that. They're, I mean, pretty much parallel to what we had last year. But the rent payment was an ominous sign. We'll be sending all this stuff out too, so go to the next one. Okay, this map shows, it's a little confusing. I tried to break out the different zip codes where the highest needs are. So this is the 2 years, and it's roughly probably the same. These are housing needs in all of those housing terms that you just saw throughout Cuyahoga County. Any, the lightest green is anywhere in the county where there was just at least one housing need that was on that report, up to 1,075. And then it highlights, I don't know if you can see it, it's a little small, the zip codes where the highest needs were. And the highest needs were, and this is pretty routinely the case, 44108, that's East Cleveland, Glenville area. 44105, Slavic Village, has never stopped being #1 in housing needs ever since the mortgage foreclosure crisis. And then 44102 is on the west side, of course, obviously. Okay, just to go to the next, and well, and I should say at the bottom here are the ages of people who contact 211 for housing needs. You can see from 2019 to 2020, pretty much still the same. Our biggest area where people are contacting us about housing or percentages are, you know, between 35 and 65 is where the ages of people that contact us. Okay, you can go to the next one. Okay, now these are the unmet needs. Now the difference between the met needs and the unmet needs for 211, when we say met, it doesn't mean these people got money. What it means is we had something to give them. We had some referral to give them for Cleveland Housing Network's assistance or whatever it was. So you can see that these are ones where people, when they're considered unmet if for some reason they can't, they don't meet the eligibility, their income's too high, or they refuse it. That sometimes happens with the shelters. The people will say, I don't want to go to a shelter, so they refuse the help. In the case of, if you look at our rent assistance here, even though we had like double the referrals from last year that we gave out for rent payment assistance, the unmet needs are double the rent payment assistance from last year. And I think part of the reason for this, in talking to people, was that people felt there was a really huge burden with the documents that were required for a number of these rent payment programs. A lot of folks don't have access to scanners, don't have access to, you know, I mean, one provider told me that she wasn't able to give out any money because there was a requirement, this is because of federal CARES dollars, there was a requirement that she provide a written lease, and she is on a month-to-month lease, so she couldn't do it. So she couldn't get, there was just a number of barriers to people actually using the rent assistance, from what I'm hearing. Okay, and then again, this is the first 6 months, eviction prevention, not much going on there. I want to point out something about the mortgage payment assistance. You'll notice that in 2019, it was only 22 for the first 6 months, and then it's hopping up to 111. One of the things that happened was in October of 2019, the Save the Dream program through OFA, which is the federal program that's had been like the hardest hit fund way back in the mortgage problems time. That continued, but it ended in October of 2019. So I think that probably has something to do with, that's the request for payment assistance. The other mortgage topic here is the mortgage delinquency. That's counseling, housing counseling. And like I said, I just ran the July reports. So I'm going to just talk about them, and we can send them out, and Matt can answer questions about them too. But there is some interesting changes coming with the July one. So I'll just talk about them. For the month of July, this is up through yesterday, rent payment continues to be number one. We had over 1,800 referrals for rent payment in July alone. So that means there's like a pretty big increase over the average number of rent requests for the first, even over the first 6 months. We're starting to see an increase in the electric and gas and water service payment. The state EPA has ended their moratorium on water shutoffs. So we don't know what that's going to happen. And the gas and electric have deadlines planned. Okay, but I want to point out, the thing we're here to talk about is evictions. So here's the change that I see with the evictions. Cleveland housing courts opened up again on June 15th. Apparently some of the suburban housing courts never did stop filing evictions. But as you saw with the eviction referrals we had, there weren't that many of them. They were pretty much comparable to 2019. In the month of July in 2019, we had 33 referrals for eviction prevention. This month, we've had 66, so that's double. And one of the things I did is break that out to see, like, who did we send people to? The majority of them, again, this is mostly Cleveland. This is always the way with the housing information, is Cleveland's way far ahead of it. Of the 66 referrals for eviction prevention, 26 of them were in Cleveland. And 16 of those were to the Right to Counsel program, the new program that Legal Aid is doing that provides counseling to someone going to housing court who has a minor child and meets the income. But the rest of the referrals for eviction prevention assistance, and eviction prevention can be anything from legal help. There's not so much money out there right now for this, but it's mostly legal help. So it's really spread, and this is not so usual with the housing referrals. The 60% of the referrals for eviction prevention in July are spread out over 15 different suburbs. Most of them, the top 5 are East Cleveland, Euclid, Warrensville Heights, and Garfield Heights. And goes down from there. And so, but it's only 66, but that's double, just to point that out. So we're really seeing that starting to happen. And when you talk about the tsunami, it doesn't look like it's a tsunami. It looks like it's a drip, but it is going up. And I guess that's about all I've got.
Hey, Phil, you're on mute.
Thank you, Louise. Now we're going to move to Judge Mona Scott from Cleveland Housing Court to give us a sense of what they're seeing at the court and how this reflects the data that we're seeing. Judge Scott?
I'm sorry. Okay, I had to unmute myself. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I don't know why my screen is just showing this. So a little bit of information with regards to us. We opened back up June 15th to allow eviction filings. And we started our virtual docket. So June 15th, we saw, these were pre-COVID filings when we opened our doors, the courts back up from the 90-day moratorium that we granted. And I was surprised to know that some of the suburban courts were still allowing evictions to take place. Unbeknownst to me, I thought everyone was doing moratoriums. June 15th, for the week of June 15th through June 19th, we had 352 filings. We were concerned that we were going to have an onslaught of filings, so we limited to, I believe, 125 filings a day. That entire week we that was probably, out of all the weeks we've been open, that was our highest filing week. So we received 352 filings that week, and it's been going down ever since. We can jump forward to the week of June 29th through July 2nd. We had a total of 56 filings, and we know that the right to counsel took place starting July 1st. And then rental assistance also it was activated during that time. We go to the week of July 6th through July 10th. We had a total of 86 filings for eviction. And then we go to the week of July 13th through July 17th. We had a total filing of 113. That's all of the data that I have so far. We did not receive the filings for last week's total eviction filings, but the numbers have been going down. I think it's a concentrated effort with us having a discussion with people in public and also with legal aid and the push to let everyone know that there is rental assistance out there. We've also had 58 mediations to have landlords and the tenants have a discussion about possibly not going forward with evictions, in the hopes that the tenant receive those dollars from the rental assistance program out of the city of Cleveland. We've had, in addition to that, 30 plus rental assistance referrals. So that first week of, I believe it was that first week of June 15th, give me 1 second. July 1st, we had an incident, and it was a kind of a mishap with something coming out of the clerk's office, where we had over 40 people show up in person on the 3rd floor. We ended up passing out rental assistance information and paperwork. So we didn't capture the data from that day, but we ended up giving out personal information to those individuals. So when we say we have 30 plus rental assistance contacts, we captured the plus for those people that we made those personal contacts, because I myself gave out information sheets to all the tenants that showed up that day, to people they can reach out to, including the Legal Aid Society for the Right to Counsel program. Let's see what else. And then this data that we're giving out does not capture the ADR incident with our alternative dispute resolution attorney and staff members. So it's only capturing the 58 mediation with our 1 mediator, but also all of our housing court specialists are mediators. So it's not capturing all of those individual mediations, because I know I've signed off on a lot of AJEs where they're looking to, they're patiently waiting, and by they, I mean the landlords are patiently waiting for the back rent from the months of April to June. So what we're noticing is there is a lowering of eviction filings, and I think it's because we're having those conversations and encouraging people to at least consider mediation and not move forward with evictions. There is a slight hesitation with the landlords, and then there is some landlords that are just not interested in getting any monies or back rent from the tenants, that they simply want the tenants gone. And there's nothing the court can do about that in persuading them not to have the tenant pay back rent and stay. A couple of things is that we are knowing the housing court did prepare for the digital divide, in that we have 2 poly webcams located in 2 separate rooms that are sanitized, that will allow for the individuals, for tenants, and even some attorneys to come in to participate in the Zoom hearings. These are for people that do not have the capabilities or the know-how to come into these virtual hearings, that this will allow them to participate with the assistance of staff. to be placed in a room, and then we will allow them to log in and be heard along with their counsel, including legal aid, and also the landlord and their counsel, and the magistrate. We also, because of ADA requirements, we also are prepared to have in-person hearings, so we have dedicated days for those. And then just to be clear that we do not allow the public to participate in just sitting in on these Zoom hearings. We are requesting that you make a call to the housing specialist and submit your name and your email address so that we can get the Zoom link to you, because the Zoom links are constantly changing every so many days. That is to protect the court and the hearings, because there are so many issues with Zoom hacking or Zoom bombing. And so we will never have the same Zoom link. And of course, Chip would know this, even as he sends out the Zoom link for this panel. This time next week, that Zoom link will not be the same. It'll be a different number. So we can't post it on our web page or our Facebook page, because that Zoom link is forever changing. If there are any questions, I will be here at least for the next 30 minutes. And then I have to go back to my criminal virtual hearings, because I do have a docket today. But I just want to make clear that my Deputy Chief Housing Specialist, Darlene English, is on this call. And then also, I did say that my Chief Magistrate, Tracy Gonzalez, will be on this call, but she has a doctor appointment. I do have the Deputy Chief, Myra Embry, will be on this call to answer any questions once I depart off of it. If you have any questions, I'm here until 1 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a reminder, if you have a question, please write it up in the chat, and then we can ask those questions of the panelists. Okay, thank you. So that was a look at where we are in the city of Cleveland, and we thought it would be important to get a sense of where we are on the suburban courts. And as we heard from 211, there are requests for assistance on eviction, throughout the area. So we're very happy to have the Honorable Judge J.J. Costello from the Cleveland Heights Municipal Court to give us his sense of what we're seeing in the suburban courts.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us, and thanks to everyone behind the scenes who put this together. Just a little bit about myself. I've been on the bench here in Cleveland Heights since January of 2018. But prior to that, my law practice, a great deal of it was landlord-tenant actions, and litigated these matters throughout Ohio. For those of you who haven't left your house in a little while, I don't know where that's someone not muted. Anyway, all right. So for those of you who haven't left your house in a little while,
Oh, this is bad.
for those of you who haven't left your house in a little while, and or those of you who have some trouble.
Party dinner.
All right, well, I'll just continue. All right, so anyway,
Excuse me, Bill, could you tell people to mute themselves? I see Joseph Meisner's not muted and he's talking.
Hi, sorry. I thought I was muted. Wait.
All right. So in Cleveland Heights, the rental market is largely single families, doubles, and multi-units. We only have a few large tower apartment complexes, so that sets us apart from some of the other suburban areas in terms of the types of evictions and the volume of evictions that we get. There's property management companies certainly here, but there's also a lot of individuals who own just one or two units that are renting them out. To give you a sense of the pre-COVID-19, sort of the way that the evictions worked in Cleveland Heights, all those hearings were scheduled on a single day in the morning at a single time, and I would hear all of them. So it was cattle called one time, and generally we were scheduling those out about every 3 weeks. So from the time that the case was filed, you would get a hearing date about 3 weeks afterwards. And we would do roughly, prior to COVID, between 15 and 20 evictions would actually go forward or be scheduled a week. And in fact, I look back and the week just prior to sort of the COVID changes, we had 17 scheduled that week. At the time, when both parties are present, while I would certainly never force anybody into settlement, I would strongly encourage it. And we did provide proposed settlement agreements that included pay-to-stay agreements, agreements to move out either with or without a judgment. And for those pay-to-stay agreements and non-judgment evictions, we would provide status hearings. So on that same, it would be Wednesday mornings, the same day and time. We'd also have status hearings, which were compliance hearings. And if everybody was abiding by the terms of the agreement, no one needed to appear. But if either party had breached the agreement, then the parties could appear on that day, and the decision would be made as it relates to a breach on that agreement. In terms of once the COVID started to hit, to give you a sense of how this court approached that, on March 16th, I continued every move out, eviction, status hearing that was scheduled for 3 weeks. I bumped everything out 3 weeks. Before those went forward on March 30th, all evictions, status hearings, and move outs were suspended until further order. So that included not only those March 16 ones, but everything going forward at that point. There was a provision that indicated that if there was a reason, that the person had reason to believe that they needed their hearing to go forward, they could file a motion. We did have one such, as I recall, I think there was only one such motion filed during the period of the stay, and that actually resolved itself before it was necessary for me to get involved. Then on May 26th, I issued an order indicating that starting June 15th, we were going to begin again with eviction status hearings and move outs, limiting it to the number of people that would appear. And it also provided, and using remote technology whenever available. And then it also indicated that plaintiffs and landlords would have to provide proof of compliance with the CARES Act. And we did provide an affidavit that it's still available on the court's website, and the litigants can have access to a proposed affidavit indicating compliance or that you don't fall under the CARES Act. After that stay, we'd implemented, it applied not only to the evictions, certainly, but to all the hearings that we started having. Again, a number of precautions, the 6 feet distancing, masks are required in the courtroom. The clerk's office was already separated from the general public with plexiglass, but we installed plexiglass in a number of other locations, including check-ins and in the courtrooms themselves. And then we got back to hearing evictions, and I still hear them all. They're still on Wednesday mornings, but instead of just a single 8:30 for everybody, it's staggered. So they're every 15 minutes, and we only schedule, I think it's 2 or 3 at a time, and so that we're able to space it out. And when your case is up, you're more likely to be called right at that time, as opposed to waiting and creating a number of extra people in the courtroom. We do indicate that, or we allow for remote hearings on those, although I have not, on other matters, I've had people, of course, take advantage, but so far I've not done an eviction remotely, but that is at least available and to people. And we also provide to all the tenants that come through, and it's also available on the court's website, a resources and emergency relief information handout that includes some of the information that was talked about earlier, and other agencies nearby that provide, because, in addition to rental assistance, as was sort of indicated, if someone doesn't have to or can get provided some food or something else, maybe they then have some access to monies that would have normally been spent on food to pay for their rent. But so that's provided to tenants. In terms of the numbers that I've seen here, we did, of course, have a backlog of cases when we had that 3-month stay, although we've since now caught up, and we are in fact back to that same sort of time frame when your eviction, and when a plaintiff files the eviction, generally it's scheduled about 3 weeks out. So we're back to that same time frame as we were before. We've worked through all that backlog, and that's in part because sort of what you're hearing here is that we have not seen the numbers increase. Generally, and this was set out in the Supreme Court's report, and we've seen it here too, is that generally in the summer there's a jump up. We've not seen that jump up, and to the contrary, in fact, we've seen a reduction in the number of evictions that are filed. I think I heard, I think there were 13 that were scheduled yesterday, but when I checked yesterday, right now we've only got 5 that are scheduled next week. So we've seen a reduction, and I think that's in part to, of course, everything that the CARES Act and the support that's been provided. And I reached out to a couple other suburban judges just to get a sense from them as well. And the few that I did hear back from, this of course may not be across the board. And I heard anecdotally that there's a few courts that have seen a dramatic increase. But for the most part, the judges that I heard back from indicated that they also, the suburban judges, had also seen a slowdown in filings. Although we're all sort of anticipating that potentially, again, unless there's some change, that 30 days from that July 25th date when the CARES Act ended, and then certainly if the $700 or the $600 goes away or is reduced, or some of these other funds start to drop, it we'll certainly start to see an increase, and we're preparing as best we can for that. So that's everything that I've got. I'll be around to answer any questions. If there are questions, I'm happy to do so. But I think that's everything that I've got at this point.
Thank you. We did get a note from Judge Montgomery of the Shaker Courts, and she indicated that they did not stop their evictions, but screened every filing for the CARES, Section 8, and HUD protections, and their mediation was and continues to be offered. They only had filings their filings for evictions have plummeted, similar experience that with, I guess, Cleveland Heights. And for example, this week only 2 cases were called. They provide information to both landlords and tenants, and they have no backlog. But only essential parties on a case at a time are permitted in the courthouse. We did have a question for Judge Scott. Someone said that I thought she had mentioned something about that there were 30 plus sources for rental assistance contacts. And I'm not quite clear about the question, but so I think.
What I stated was that we had 30 individuals that we assisted in getting them rental assistance, that we passed out contacts for to give them rental assistance. So some of those people came before, they showed up to testify, and we captured them. The magistrate captured their information, contact information, and we either the magistrate spoke to them about rental assistance and the landlord, or and they went into mediation, or the magistrate referred them to the housing specialist and they connected them to rental assistance. And some of them were more specific. Either they should have went through the Department of Aging or the VA, because those different departments reached out to our housing specialists specifically and said that they had monies to assist those individuals that qualify for their programs. So we have been capturing those informations as the tenants came to testify during their eviction process. The concern we have, along with legal aid, is that we do want tenants to come in and participate in the process. We can't make them come. All we do is serve them their summons. It would be, if I can ask everyone to come and participate, it's always one-sided if just the landlord and their attorney show up. But if the tenant doesn't show up, we don't know who needs assistance. We don't know who's missing in this process and what their needs are. And so we just have to move forward with the process and grant evictions. What I have noticed sometimes as I look through the packages is if there's a commingling of funds, where a landlord will come in and testify and say, this is not under the CARES Act. And with my prior experience as a fair housing administrator and working in the Department of Community Development, I know that there can be a commingling of funds. I have to ask the magistrate to call that back in for a hearing, because this is not supposed to go through the process. Because this particular landlord is kind of prevented from evicting this tenant under the CARES Act. So it was a couple of cases I captured and didn't sign off on it, but I asked that it be called back in for a hearing, because they have to come and testify that this particular mortgage or this landlord is not receiving any supplemental payments from Eden. per se, voucher payments from Eden, because I know that Eden may receive some funding from HUD, CDBG funding, or anything like that. So it is not our job to make that determination. It is the landlord job to really clarify that there is no funds that are captured under the CARES Act. So I have pushed some of those things back out and had the landlord come back in and retestify and did not grant an eviction.
We have another, can you let us know how many evictions have occurred in Cleveland?
How many have been granted?
Yes.
I don't know how many have been granted because we are still going through the process, and then you have to wait if people, you know, file stays or motions to vacate and things like that. We still go back and forth because, you know, they filed motions to vacate because they didn't get a Zoom link, or motions to vacate because they have other reasons. So ones that have been totally granted, we have not captured that for the month of July. With the rental assistance that took effect July 1st. So we won't have those numbers probably until the mid-August. But how many have we heard? The hearings and everything? A total number. From July 1st to July 17th, 231.
Okay.
But some of those, that's just how many were filed.
Right.
Not necessarily have been heard. Some of them have been, as I said, have gone through mediation. Some of them have been voluntarily dismissed. Some of them have been dismissed by me. So that's just the numbers that have been filed. So I can't give you a full breakout of all of those cases from July, and that's from July 1st through July 17th. And that's a very low number because we could have on a normal, this time last year, 231 filings one day. Okay. So for that to be 3 weeks, that's pretty impressive with the rental assistance.
Thank you. So I think that leads into the question of, so where do you get rental assistance and how do you get it? And we know that you can contact 211, but now we're going to hear from Kevin Nowak, who's the Executive Director of CHN Housing Partners, that is working and administrating funds from both the City of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County for rental assistance in coordination with Eden. Kevin.
Sure. Well, thanks everyone for having me, and looking forward to chatting with you today. I'm going to get my PowerPoint here set up. I think we're in good shape. What are you seeing on the screen? Are you seeing my PowerPoint or what?
Yes, we do.
Okay, cool. Let's get this going. Boom. All right, let's move you over here. All right, I'm Kevin Nowak, Executive Director of CHN Housing Partners. As Phil had mentioned, we're administering the rental assistance for City of Cleveland, Cuyahoga County. I'll give a little intro of CHN. I think most of you know us, but I'll give a little intro anyway, just to make sure that you know who we are and what we do. Let's see here. That lost my place on the controls. There we go. Boom. All right. CHN is an organization. We're a nonprofit. It's founded in 1981, and we focus on the power of a permanent address. And what we do is work with other organizations, government entities, financial institutions, really to try to maximize housing stability and also home ownership opportunity for all within Northeast Ohio. Our geographic focus has been Northeast Ohio, but then we've also expanded beyond Northeast Ohio into adjacent states to try to help fill the gaps in capacity that are within those different cities like Detroit and Pittsburgh and Buffalo. We serve just about 40,000 annually, and we do that through 6 service areas. So 6 service areas are affordable housing and real estate development, everything from ownership to development to construction to property management. We're a lender. We do residential mortgage lending, utility bill pay assistance. We and COGC are the 2 largest heat providers here in Cleveland, Cuyahoga County. We do counseling and education, everything from eviction prevention, home buyer ed, foreclosure prevention, financial capabilities, energy and conservation, weatherization. We're the largest weatherization provider in Northeast Ohio, and we actually do that through 22 counties in the great state of Ohio. And community building and engagement, which we work with our CDCs within the community to help improve our communities, as well as work with our youth, who live in our housing, to provide them economic opportunity. In rental assistance, we've partnered with the city of Cleveland, Cuyahoga County, as well as a number of the inner ring suburbs, Euclid, Cleveland Heights, East Cleveland, and Lakewood, to provide a broad, a broad platform that really provides a universal one-stop shop for emergency rental assistance in Cleveland, Cuyahoga County. I know that there are a number of people from the city of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County that are on the call today. And I just, wanted to say thank you for a lot of their foresight on this. They've taken really a leadership role in creating creating a system that allows for us to serve people in an efficient way, across the entire county. And so I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that, because they have been, thoughtful, foresightful leaders here in this. So who qualifies for this, for our public, or for our, so our rental assistance funds, we have 11.3 million available from the city of Cleveland. We have 6.8 million available through Cuyahoga County. What we'll talk about is how that divvies up between us and Eden here in a couple of minutes. We can provide through this platform both emergency rental assistance throughout Cuyahoga County, but then also we can provide longer term shallow subsidy, through Eden within the city of Cleveland. So people who qualify for this resource are people who have been impacted by COVID, throughout the city of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, and who are having difficulty in making rental payments as a result. The residents must meet an eligibility requirement of 120 from an income perspective of 120% of the area median income or less. They need to provide documentation related to that income, and they also need to provide documentation related to the COVID-19 related hardship. With us being able to integrate in the Cuyahoga County's treasury funds, that allowed for kind of more flexibility than what you typically see from the CDBG, ESG, home dollars that many of us are familiar with, which was really nice, to be able to expand it. We thought it was important to expand beyond what we see as our traditional group that income band that we serve, because this particular crisis is unique in the breadth and depth that it's impacted our community. Some applicants, depending upon what their sustainability looks like, may be required to also take more in-depth financial counseling. All right, so how this works. What will happen is, people come in through our, CHN is the central point of entry for all of the rental assistance. We screen the applicants. We wanted to make sure that the program is as accessible as it possibly can be across the board. We have digital access as well as paper access. Our online portal, as reflected here, is neorenthelp.org. Again, that was neorenthelp.org. And there's also a toll-free number. Whenever anyone comes in, they're also going to be screened for utility assistance programs. And what this allows for us to do is to really integrate the full suite of services that CHN provides to provide and help maximize housing stability. I think, as we all know, if people are having a hard time paying their rent, they're also probably having a hard time paying for their utilities. It's a first come, first served basis, but priority is given to those who are already in the eviction process. I have some data about that will follow. If an applicant qualifies, they can have up to 3 months worth of rent that be paid directly to their landlords in emergency rental assistance. And if someone has a need for more than 3 months, then from that 3 months, what they'll do is then we would also, after we've paid for 3 months, we would transfer them over to Eden. Eden, it can provide a longer term shallow subsidy for up to 9 months worth of rental assistance. The subsidy through which Eden is administering the program is ESG and home. So it has a lower income qualification standard for that longer term shallow subsidy. It also has a different level of kind of inspection requirements and qualification documents that will be needed. But it provides for that nice nice comprehensive resource of up to 12 months worth of 12-month worth of rent. One other really interesting thing about this, and something that we've worked on, and I see a couple of our other friends on the phone that are at referral agencies that we're working with, whether they see Good Legal Aid on here, and CHS and Home Fair Resource Center. Not being exclude anyone, this is who's on my screen right in front of me. We're working together to help through a comprehensive system that actually can use Salesforce to allow for us to kind of cross-refer and have these kind of really warm referrals. I know within our community development space, oftentimes the challenge has been ensuring that when someone is referred to one organization, from one organization to another, that you have kind of accountability and you have finality in the end. This system allows for us to have those kind of warm referrals and allows for us to work more efficiently together. We hope that anyone on this call that is involved in this process would refer their clients over. Again, we can do it through the website. A lot of people have been complimentary of the mobile app. It's very easy. You take your phone, fill in your information, take pictures of your documentation, upload it, and you're in good shape. So the next thing I'll touch on is the need. We started working through this process in June, and when 211 really opened up a coordinated effort with us once the program was announced to begin taking calls. By the time we had gotten to July 1st, when we went live with our application, there were 1,400 referrals that had come through from 211. From getting to July 15th, when the program became fully operational, we had 1,900 people that had already applied. That gets us to today. Today, we've had almost 3,300 people, and these are 33 unduplicated households that have applied. The 2258 number that's on here is the number of applicants that have started but haven't finished their application. So it's an indicator that we have another almost 2,300 households that are in the process of applying because they have a need to do so. 642 applications are those that are that have identified as being in the eviction process, and then we have almost 700 that are in the process of us evaluating them and in the process of kind of getting to a complete application. So then we go to the reasons for need. We've created an analytical platform to try to understand where the need is, what the need is, why the need is, and that can help us to be able to address the need, and then also work with friends like that we have on the phone today from Senator Brown and Senator Portman's office to really understand kind of what resources we need and why. As many of us would have expected, because of the acute nature of an impact on the job market, we've had, the most significant reason that people have given for having a need has been due to layoff and furlough. Second being reduced hours. Then you see a significant amount of people who have lost income because of child family care issues. Those have been sick from COVID, business owners whose businesses have been impacted, as well as people who have had increases in expenses due to COVID. You can see the city of Cleveland is in the top row. The other is Cuyahoga County outside of Cleveland. The amount of rent owed when we look across the board is fairly significant. So you can see 2.4 million that's been identified within the city of Cleveland. That averages about $1,500 per applicant. And we're at 2.9 million in Cuyahoga County, which is outside of Cleveland, which is averaging about $1,700 per applicant. We've consistently seen that spread of about $200 between the city of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County due to differences in the average rent within the city and then in the county outside of the city. as many of us know, and the demographic data that we are continuing to follow shows, our African American community within Northeast Ohio is being disproportionately impacted by housing instability and this crisis. With the African American community, being by far the single largest demographic identified as being impacted in our data. The need by city. So we actually have two different slides here. One that shows by rent owed, and the other by the number of applicants. But when you look at this data, what you're seeing is the need that's going across kind of the entire city and the suburbs. What we have seen from our data, City of Cleveland being the largest. And then, Euclid, Warrensville Heights, Garfield Heights, Maple Heights, and Lakewood being the top 5 exhibiting need within the suburbs. But I mean, you can see through the list here that this is spreading well beyond our entering suburbs. This is another cut at that same data that shows the total owed by city. So a couple of things that we're learning, one is that there are a large number of clients who are starting but not completing their applications online. And so we're reaching out to understand, are there any barriers that we may be able to eliminate there? There's a large number of clients who aren't fully completing their info. That becomes a barrier for us to be able to serve them because we need to make sure we have all the documentation in place to be able to qualify them. So we've been trying to create better direction and incentive for people to complete their applications in full. Many of the applicants are in need of more than 3 months worth of rent. And then finally, we're seeing most saying that they do not know how they're going to pay their next month's rent. So again, if there's any way that we can that you can help to get the word out, we sure would appreciate your help. The contact information is listed in here. We have been working in every channel that you can imagine. I know that both of our judges that discussed today, we have been in communication with them and others at housing courts. We've been working with traditional, non-traditional community development groups. We've been working with Ohio Means Jobs, we're working with Northeast Ohio Apartments Association, among others, the Landlord Bar, really to try to ensure that we're meeting the need in the community.
Kevin, we had one quick question, I think, on that slide. Do you know how many people are approaching you who do not have unemployment insurance, was a question?
Yeah, so I don't have that data in front of me today. There is actually, there's been some, what we've been having to do is to tread a little bit softly within that space. HUD hasn't been given the kind of clear guidance on how and if we need to be accounting for the extra $600, that people may be receiving from federal dollars, through unemployment. It's something that we're still working on, but I don't have that data directly in front of me.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And we've also had a question about will these slides and data be available? Usually after our forums, we do post the slides that have been used on the in the forum, so those will be available on the Organize Ohio website. And if you signed up for the forum, you can just go to that link and you can see a way to find that information. So now I'd like to move to some of the other assistance and what is around the whole eviction question. And so Abigail Stout, who is the director of the housing unit at Cleveland Legal Aid, is here to give us an update on what they're seeing through the Tenant Representation Project.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Abigail Stout, I'm the managing attorney of the housing group at Legal Aid. I'm sure many of you know about what we do, but just for those of you who might not, we are a nonprofit law firm that deals only in civil cases. Our mission is to secure justice and resolve fundamental problems for those who are vulnerable by providing high quality legal representation and by doing systemic work. We cover a number of different civil substantive areas, including consumer law, family law, public benefits, education law, bankruptcy, and many others. And of course, one of them is landlord tenant law. And that's what the group that I work with does. So traditionally, we have represented cases, eviction cases, eviction defense cases. And we have recently had a little bit of a change in sort of the structure of our group because last October, the city of Cleveland passed an ordinance to entitle tenants who are being evicted who are at or below 100% of the federal poverty guidelines and have at least one child in the household to legal representation. And so that is full legal representation. Those tenants who are eligible and who are going through eviction and come to us are entitled to a lawyer to represent them in the entirety of their case. So for the eviction, and then if there's a money claim filed against them. That particular ordinance became active on July 1st, which ended up being sort of fortuitous given everything that has changed in the world. We increased our staff and hired 6 new folks. And now we have a staff in the housing group that we call the Right to Counsel team. There are 12 people on that team, including 2 paralegals. And they will be taking all the cases that come in under the Right to Counsel ordinance. And then we have our housing team, which continues to do the work that we've been doing for years and years. So that's, again, eviction defense throughout our 5-county service area. We serve Lorain, Cuyahoga, Lake, Geauga, and Ashtabula. But it's also working on the many various systemic issues that come up and that are, need to be addressed from a legal standpoint. Our new staff our team started on June 1st. And typically when we have a new staff of training, and they're not all new attorneys, many of them have a lot of experience, we would have them paired up with attorneys going to court and really seeing and living the litigation experience of tenants. But due to COVID and our courts being closed at that time, much of that training took place in what they call the Right to Counsel boot camp. Lots of Zoom calls, lots of sort of lectures and that type of thing, some moot court experiences. Then once the courts started opening up again, we started assigning cases. And so really the cases that came in between June 15 when the court opened up until July 1st, well, we're not eligible under the law, but any cases filed from July 1st on, those tenants who are eligible under the law are getting counsel. But we were already taking cases before that in order just to represent clients and also to see, how to represent clients given a very, very different court process these days. So what we are seeing is, there was this sort of big rush of filings that occurred and concern amongst legal advocates. We knew that many landlords had probably been waiting to file evictions, but as the judge mentioned earlier, really those numbers have receded to a more normal number of filings, and that has been somewhat sort of a parallel situation within calls that we're receiving. That being said, our numbers for landlord-tenant inquiries are up by 25% in comparison to a year ago. And I think sort of during the period of time when the courts were closed, we remained pretty much the same in terms of the inquiries and the need as a year ago, because we opened up our case acceptance to accept cases where an eviction wasn't pending or notice hadn't been filed yet or served yet, in order to start hooking people up with the rent assistance that is available. So we did a lot of that in those months that the courts were closed. We did a lot of working with our partners and the rent assistance that was available before the city and county funds. And that, I think, really helps sustain a number of people in their housing. We've now sort of pretty much shut that down to just referrals to the program that Kevin talked about, the Neo Rent Help. And in place of that, we're really concentrating on representing tenants who are being evicted. The tenants that we're seeing, you know, they match the data that Kevin showed. They are people who lost their income because they lost their jobs, they had reduced hours, they had to stay home to care for a sick family member or their children, or they were sick themselves. I mean, those are largely the numbers, the types of cases that we're seeing that are coming in under the right to counsel category. This is with under right to counsel, you know, someone is eligible up into the time of their hearing, or even during their hearing, really. And so, you know, what we are sort of working out are ways to very, very quickly respond when tenant inquiries come in, and there's a hearing in a couple of days, or, you know, even tomorrow, that type of thing. We're trying to figure out systems to make sure that that person gets the representation. Some of that has included seeking continuances from the court. And some of that has also included really, really rapid evaluation and reaching out to the other side very quickly to see if there were some agreements that can be made. We've conducted outreach by working with the court. They are putting in a flyer into every single summons that goes out to tenants who are being evicted. It's a flyer that informs people that they may be eligible for a free lawyer. It gives some of the criteria, and it has our contact information. In addition to that, the court is providing us with a list of all of the defendants who have cases filed against them. And we are taking that list and having a second mailing to them that it comes directly from the right to counsel address, and is really addressing, it's the same information, but it's sort of a second touch. And that is all with the great help of United Way, who is our partner in this, our main partner, who has helped develop all the outreach, has worked on media, and has identified an evaluator, and really is driving so much of the programming. And then we're also working with NEAC and DSA. They had come to us because they were going to start a tenant outreach where they actually went and would knock on doors of people who had evictions filed against them. And so they came to us and said, is there anything we can do? And so we've given them our information. We touched base with them, and they are going out on a 2-week basis every 2 weeks on a Saturday, picking a geographic area so they're being most efficient with their time and their volunteers' time, and going up to doors, knocking on doors, and saying, you know, hey, we know that we saw in the public record that there was an eviction filed against you. Here's some rent assistance information. Here's some information about right to counsel. Can we take your number and follow up with you? And that we know from the first time they did it, we got 4 or 5 referrals, and we represented at least 2 of those people. I think we represented at least 4 of them. 2 of them already had their hearings, and I think they were successful. And then the other two, I think their cases were continued. This last Saturday, they went out, and out of almost 300 defendants, they contacted like 100 or they knocked on the doors of 168, and they made contact with maybe 51 people they talked to. They left literature for 94 people, and they got the phone numbers for 35 people. They'll be following up with them saying, hey, did you call legal aid? And then sort of one last sort of perspective of evictions from the tenant and legal aid side is, you know, it is a whole new way of practicing. We're not, when you think an eviction courtroom, you think of the magistrate being up on a bench, the crowded sort of packed in seating area, people congregating in the hallway, lawyers negotiating over there, people mediating in a room. Well, none of that is happening, at least in Cleveland. It's, you know, there might be some people showing up to court, but most of the hearings are are scheduled as a virtual hearing. And you know, it's been a work in progress for us to figure out how to enter into those hearings and represent our clients. Mostly we bring our clients into our office and socially distance, have them in a conference room in order to be in the same room with our client when we're representing them. But it's, you know, we're still learning how to best, you know, provide services to those folks, given the new sort of setup that we have. So that is where we're at now. I will say two last things. Our phone number is, and I'll put it in the chat, it's 216-687-1900. And people shouldn't be limited to those who think that they are eligible under the ordinance. If someone is being evicted, I would please encourage them to call us, because we have other attorneys too that can probably at least give advice, if not represent them. And the website is freeevictionhelp.org. And that will get you to the main website for right to counsel and how to apply for services, freeevictionhelp.org.
Thank you very much. And we'll, I think we have some questions for you later, but I want to move on. So from the eviction, from the representation of tenants, I think a lot of the focus is on housing stability, trying to make sure that we're protecting tenants, to make sure that they don't face an eviction, they're able to continue to afford their rent. And oftentimes, you know, we forget the other side of the equation, which is the landlords and what they're facing. And the reality is that many landlords may not want to evict a tenant, but are in a position in which they have bills. They have to pay for their ongoing maintenance and expenses, and they have to have some income coming in, and they're put in a difficult position. So we thought it'd be important to hear from the landlord perspective as to, you know, what are they, you know, from the Northern Ohio Apartment Association, what are they telling their members? What are types of things that are they hearing? What types of things are they doing? I know they've been working with a CHN to try to get information out, but Charles Schulman, who's the president of the Northern Ohio Apartment Association, is here with us to give us the landlord perspective on the eviction situation, the problems that tenants are having paying their rent.
All right. Thank you very much. The apartment associations, both statewide and locally, have tried to very effectively help with the eviction, the fears of evictions for the tenants. And many of us as property owners and managers have been trying to set up criteria for tenants who are finding themselves in difficult positions to either find access to funds or to work with them on payment programs so that they don't have to worry about all of a sudden having a huge amount owed. There are all sorts of different things that landlords are looking at And with the moratorium ending, there's a reality, unfortunately, that evictions sometimes are a necessity. And the landlords, as Phil just said, are often faced with a number of economic concerns of their own, the ability to pay their mortgage, the ability to pay their utilities, do the repairs, things of that sort. Without the income from the tenants, it places an unreasonable burden where they can't just provide free housing, especially if they're a conventional landlord. Also, many of the landlords weren't able to get forbearance of their mortgages. If they were, many of them were able to do things for their tenants to make it a little more accommodating. But those who didn't get forbearance were put in a different situation entirely. There has been discussion both on the state level and the national level through the National Apartment Association and the Ohio Apartment Association to create a criteria to give to tenants who are unable to pay for the proper reasons. If a tenant just fails to pay, it's a different story, and the eviction process, should still be utilized. If they are unable to pay because they don't have the income because they've been laid off or furloughed or don't have the economic means, then most landlords appear, from at least other than the smaller mom and pop type landlords, to be trying to put together programs or work with groups like 211 and CHN to be able to get funds for those tenants to either pay a partial or pay their rent altogether. The property management and the apartment associations industries through IRM, NAA, and some of the others have all been looking at criteria before they do start evictions. And those criteria are supposed to include things like whether the tenant was delinquent prior to the pandemic and the moratorium going into effect, as well as the other item would be whether the tenant poses some sort of safety issue, life safety for themselves or for their other tenants. And we've been counseling that people should only move forward with evictions currently if the economic issues are preceding the moratorium, or whether those items or whether those problems have something to do with whether there is a issue that would affect and negatively impact the other tenants and the physical property itself. Other than that, our industry has just been kind of watching and waiting because we really don't know what to expect. There have been all sorts of things that have been discussed as far as how there's the possibility of getting tenant rent assistance in the future, how that money will be handled and given to the tenants or paid directly to the landlord. The idea of basically everyone's all in this together is really true, because the tenants need a home and the landlords need the tenants to fill those homes so that they can meet their obligations. One of the strange things has been, though, is that for the most part, landlords have been able to rent apartments throughout this whole pandemic, some virtually, some actually in person, trying to do it appropriately with social distancing, but they have not had a huge vacancy factor as of this point, and collections really have not dropped off dramatically at this point for most segments of the apartment industry. Personally, we've seen it, the drop off in rent payments mostly on the very low income and the higher income properties, but the medium income, the workforce housing properties, we've not seen that happen with. And rent payments have been, up until now at least, still coming in at almost the normal pace. So we are seeing either the effects of people getting assistance through unemployment or having other sources to be able to make the payments, but really not a whole lot of delinquency for those in the middle income categories from workforce housing up. It's really interesting, though, that it's the higher income that we're seeing the largest portion of delinquency right now, and those who are in the lowest income classes seem to be struggling as well, but we're seeing more of an intent or an attempt to pay. And we're wondering if the higher income categories aren't paying or aren't responding to us just out of embarrassment for the inability to pay. From our standpoint, in our office, all we've asked tenants to do is let us know if there is a problem and what the problem is, and then we try and provide some assistance to enable them to be able to meet their obligations so we can meet ours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So even prior to the COVID-19, nationally, there's recognition that we have significant concerns about what happens when a tenant gets evicted and what it does to their life. Creating problems because you once evicted, if it goes on your credit rating, it's hard to rent again. It destabilizes a family, it changes kids from schooling. We had a whole year of reading a book in Cleveland, Evicted, about the case study about what happened to families in Detroit who were evicted. And in response to some of that, prior to the epidemic, Senator Portman proposed legislation to look at and provide eviction protections to help people. And so it was very timely when it was initially proposed. It seems even more timely now. And so Sam Malopoulos from Senator Portman's office is here today to give us a quick overview of what that legislation was proposing and what the status is.
Great. Well, Phil, thank you so much. And thanks for everyone for being a part of this. I'm really glad that we get to do it today. I just moved the other day, and so I apologize if my internet's a little spotty, and that's why you have this hostage video background. But, you know, we were really excited. I'm glad you mentioned the book Evicted, Phil, because that was really what started this process for us. And you know, we were reading it in the office and things like that and said, you know, Milwaukee, you know, that could be anywhere in Ohio, right? It could be anywhere in the industrial heartland. And so, you know, this is clearly an important issue, and spent a long time working with many groups on this call and housing providers and Matt Desmond and the Eviction Lab to put out that proposal at the end of last year. And who knew, but when we were talking about emergency rental assistance back in 2019, that it's actually like the most vital thing we need right now. And we would hope that in phase 4 in the HEALS Act that we would get some emergency rental assistance. Clearly, the $3.3 billion that's in there is woefully insufficient. I guess I'll briefly just talk about our legislation and some of the things that it does. There's kind of 3 buckets. There's improving the information around evictions. So we created an advisory committee on evictions at HUD with experts from the housing community, the academic community, and from the housing provider community and the landlord community to advise the secretary on evictions related issues. And we also created an evictions database to basically improve the information we have around this issue. You know, the Eviction Lab, they do great work, but they're kind of the only people in a way. And we think that there's a need to have, you know, good government data on this topic. The second piece is mitigating the consequences of eviction. And so we make some changes to some of the rules around tenant screening reports to make sure that tenants are always getting the chance to challenge incorrect information on the report, or in one circumstance, actually taking the fact that they have an eviction off the report. If they go to court and they win, we think it'd be crazy to have the eviction still remain on their record as kind of a scarlet letter. And so we think this is a kind of an important, I think there's more we can do here, but this is an important step forward and part of this conversation. And then the final piece, which has become kind of the hottest topic lately, is this emergency rental assistance piece. And what we're proposing is a new program at HUD to bring federal money to bear into local communities, supplementing what so many organizations are already doing and providing emergency rental assistance. And what we're doing is we would go to landlords, be making landlords and housing providers whole, but using kind of the local nonprofit architecture that's already on the ground. And so we'd be making grants to them, and then they would be able to be making grants or loans, and there'd be some financial counseling on the back end and things like that. And so I think we would love to see all of this legislation into play in part of phase 4, but probably most realistically it would be this portion around emergency rental assistance. I know Senator Brown has done some amazing work in this space and is also co-sponsor of this bill. And so we're really excited to have this bipartisan effort. And so, we've talked to Senator McConnell, we've talked to Senator Crapo on the banking committee. We've been talking to all of our Republicans and all of our leadership, stressing how important it is, right? That $3.3 billion is insufficient. And there's people, Senator Portman, Senator Brown, as the two leaders, really, perhaps no surprise, right? It's coming from Ohio, saying that this needs to be a priority in the HEALS Act. And we're pretty excited to be the Republican leader on this eviction issue, and I think it would make a big difference if we could get it done. And so hopefully we can do this rental assistance portion in the next month or so, and then be able to come back next year and really be able to do the rest of it, because all that other stuff is important, particularly the stuff, even though it's small to start with, that stuff around addressing some of the stigma that comes along with evictions and can linger over a number of years for folks. So I think this is something that we definitely want to continue to work on, even if we are successful on the emergency rental assistance piece. And I'm sure Beth has a lot to say about that. I think she's a lot closer to some of these negotiations on that than I am. And but we are really excited to work across the aisle and make this happen.
Okay, thank you. So let's turn to Beth, and then we can come back and ask some questions about where we are on sort of timing and process and how soon you think some of this stuff could actually happen. But as was mentioned, Beth Cooper from Senator Brown's office is here today, and Senator Brown has actually put a slightly larger dollar number on the amount of assistance that appears to be needed. And so Beth will talk about Senator Brown's approach and the legislation that he's proposed for a national rental assistance program.
Made the classic mistake. Did not unmute myself. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for having me. I've spoken with actually several people on this call over the last few years, but especially in the last couple of months as we've been working really to respond to the immediate crisis in the need for rental assistance and first the public health crisis, and now the economic crisis that's followed, the COVID-19 public health crisis. So Senator Brown, I will just say I work for Senator Brown on his committee staff. He's the ranking member of the Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, and I do Housing and Urban Affairs for him on the committee. And he's been focused on this issue of evictions and the rental housing affordability problem that we have that's a crisis across this country, and really was a pre-existing condition for us when COVID-19 hit our shores. As he often says, and National Low Income Housing Coalition data reports, a quarter of renters were already paying 50% of their income for rent when this hit our shores. We had, 12 of the 20 largest professions don't pay people at base enough to afford a one-bedroom rent. And so we have millions of families in a very precarious situation should anything go wrong, whether that's an everyday thing like a car breaking down, or a global pandemic, which puts millions and millions of people into that emergency situation all at once. So when the pandemic hit, back in March, Senator Brown was very attuned to the needs of what was likely going to happen with renters if a lot of people are put out of work. And so he got to work on the CARES Act, the assistance that passed back in March. That had a couple of really important components. It had initial tranches of funding to help renters, people experiencing homelessness through HUD, and then also established a federal eviction moratorium for about 30% of renters that have where their property has a federal nexus. Either it participates in a federal subsidy program or has a mortgage that is backed by a federally backed entity, FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. So those were great predicates. They were great first steps, but they weren't far enough, and they are not adequate to deal with the scope of the situation we find ourselves in. As you all probably know, we've discussed on this call that the federal eviction moratorium just expired on the 25th. And so anticipating that that was coming, we worked, and Senator Brown worked with Representative Waters on the House side to call for a lot of housing assistance in different components for renters and for homeowners. And what emerged out of that was eventually captured in what's called the HEROES Act on the House side. It passed about 10 weeks ago. As has been mentioned on the call, one very important component of that is $100 billion in emergency rental assistance that would go out by formula through a modified version of an existing HUD program. So we have channels to physically put them, I guess not physically, digitally, put the money out into accounts of people who are used to administering short-term rental assistance programs. That $100 billion goes out through this modified version of HUD's Emergency Solutions Grants program. It covers short-term, medium-term rent, rental arrearages. It can also cover utilities and utility arrearages, which we know is really important for a lot of people. If they get their utilities cut off and they're not able to pay that back debt, they may have a hard time ever finding a new apartment because they can't establish utilities for it. We've heard that throughout Ohio, that's a problem. So we're excited about this component. A couple of other important components. The HEROES Act also has $75 billion to help homeowners, many of whom won't be covered by federal protections on moratoria, on either forbearance or moratoria on evictions because they don't have a federal nexus. So it provides emergency assistance for them to make their mortgage payments, property taxes, and also utilities again. Sam mentioned an important component, and Senator Brown was very happy to co-sponsor the Eviction Crisis Act last year when it was introduced by Senator Portman, Senator Bennett, Senator Young. So a nice bipartisan group of senators because the eviction crisis is such a problem. And an important component of that is the credit rating protection that Sam mentioned. There is also a component of the HEROES Act that has robust consumer protection for reporting missed rental payments and the ability to correct your credit report. There are a couple of other components, targeted assistance for people experiencing homelessness. We have $10 billion for long-term rental vouchers. They're emergency rental vouchers. It doesn't permanently increase the stock of vouchers, which is what we know we need to really get a handle on our existing affordable, or it's one important component of getting a handle on our affordable housing crisis. But these would be emergency vouchers for about 200,000 folks who have the most serious needs and who would have the most serious hardest time recovering from an eviction or the economic fallout of the crisis. People experiencing homelessness, victims of domestic violence, people at risk of homelessness, and that includes some of the families that may count as homeless in HUD's or in the Department of Education definition of homeless, but not in HUD's definition of homelessness. So a broad swath of people that are at serious risk. And then also support for our existing housing providers. It also authorized funds for the home program to help landlords if their deals are falling apart, if they're at risk of not being able to put affordable housing deals forward. So a broad array of solutions. I think I've dumped a lot on you. I may have stunned the room, but the current state of play is that Senator Brown is strongly advocating for HEROES, wants, our emergency rental assistance bill has 41 co-sponsors in the Senate, and he's strongly pushing for it in the negotiations. Unfortunately, as Sam mentioned, the HEALS Act had basically nothing for rental assistance. It provided about $3 billion worth of assistance to maintain public housing because the residents of public housing are entitled, unlike almost all renters, people participating in the federal subsidy programs do have the right to come in and adjust their rent if they're unemployed or lose hours, have to care for family. But the funds that are provided in HEALS basically just backfill a little bit of that need and don't provide expanded assistance to help more people or address people experiencing homelessness. So that's what the current effort is. That's where the state of play is in the Senate. So far we haven't seen anything from Senator McConnell on housing assistance, and we're waiting for those negotiations to start, I think.
So thank you. I think it should be noted, and you mentioned about what we usually prefer Section 8, but Housing Choice Voucher now, that it is the only federal program. You don't have a lottery for food stamps. You don't have a lottery for Social Security, for Medicaid. We say if you qualify for those programs because of your income and your need, you get those programs. Section 8 is the only program in which we don't have enough certificates for those people who actually qualify and need it. And we wouldn't be facing the significant crisis for evictions at this point if actually we fully funded and met the needs for those people who qualify for the Section 8 program, which is 80% of AMI, which would say that, and it's based on a sliding scale for income. The more you make, the more you're going to end up paying for your rent. It doesn't discourage people from moving out of housing. There are lots of studies that show that people aren't discouraged from moving out of public housing because of the rent. And so, when we think about addressing the eviction, needs and the eviction crisis, going forward, I think we also have to think that we need the emergency assistance now. But a lot of the emergency assistance is because we really don't have a functioning Section 8 program that should actually meet the needs of everyone.
Right. And Senator Brown also, says we're trying to meet the immediate crisis, because if we don't, millions of people will be set back in the immediate crisis. And we know, I should have said earlier, that of course we know the brunt of this falls disproportionately on Black and Brown people. Communities of color were more at risk for, more of them were renters, more of them had lower incomes to begin with. So we'll see the fallout of this crisis. If we don't do something, we will only exacerbate existing racial and economic inequality in this country. So that's the concern. But then going forward, we really do need to address our pre-existing condition of the lack of affordable housing.
So Sam, you had mentioned that Senator Portman thinks that there needs to be additional funding. Is Senator Portman supporting Senator Brown's bill for the $100 billion for rental assistance?
Yeah, we haven't come out with an exact number, but I think obviously $100 billion is what a lot of people think is the right number, yeah, I mean our hope is that we would get it in there. I think what we like about our legislation is that it extends beyond the crisis, right? We have an immediate need now, but we also know we're going to have need for emergency rental assistance in the coming years. I mean, when we developed our proposal, the idea was we know, like Beth was saying, people are spending so much money just on rent, and part of this is because of the affordability issues. But it's outrageous that we would have people being evicted for very small amounts of money, and that was what we were originally going after. And your car breaks down, these extraordinary circumstances. Say it would be better for everyone, for housing providers, for tenants. You think about the tenants in that situation, maybe going to a payday lender. We kind of think of this as an alternative, way to address some of the payday lending problems. And so I think we see that need is going to persist well after the pandemic. And so I kind of see it like the Portman bill, the Brown bill, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. And the real thing is
one is 100 billion of one.
Well, yeah, no, I'm sorry. In terms of the mechanics, not in terms of the money. No, I agree. Our bill says such sums as may be appropriated. So if Congress wants to appropriate 100 billion, no problem with that. In terms of achieving the goal, we're trying to get to the same place, and we create a new program, and the Brown bill goes through ESG, right? Like I said, 6 of one, half does the other. The goal is we need to get something into this bill, and we're going to keep pushing to accomplish that.
Thank you. So yeah, well, I think it's clear from everything said that we need a significant amount of support and funding because of the needs that are out there, and so getting this legislation passed is important, and I think that the amount of funds that Senator Brown has indicated is an amount that's is really needed to meet these needs. So looking over some of the questions that we've had, one question for Kevin. Your slides indicate AMI. I think it might be helpful for people to have a sense of what is 120% of AMI at the present time for Cuyahoga County that you're working on.
Sure. Yeah, it's about approximately $90,000.
Okay. And it's also my understanding that you're, in terms of income, if you're looking at it, it's what a person's present income is when they're coming to you and telling you where they're at in terms of their income.
That's right, Phil. So we're looking at really present income, which we would qualify as have a 30-day look back. We're also collecting, to Chuck's point, I thought Chuck's data was just really kind of interesting to see that kind of higher income and lower income, and then the kind of workforce housing, being a little bit more stable. What we have done is we're also collecting data, and we'll have a better segment once we get through processing of this initial tranche of applicants to see what their income was prior to COVID, because right now most people who are applying look like they're under 30-40%. But if they have no income and looking back 30 days, that could be someone that was making, $50, $70, $100,000, 3 months ago.
And then the other question would be, given the numbers that you have, the over 3,000 who've already applied, the others that are in the pipeline, have you projected out in terms of the amount of money that you have, sort of the ballpark as to when does the money run out?
Yeah, I think there's a to be determined there.
Okay.
We have seen a slight decline on a daily basis in terms of applications right at this moment. Our peak was about a week ago, 2 weeks ago of kind of total applications on a daily basis. So I think as we potentially see evictions ramping back up, we'll see another spike. But if we keep on a current trajectory, of where we are today, I think we would have it all committed by the end of the year in terms of the emergency assistance. That doesn't necessarily include the other assistance, the shallower subsidy that Eden is managing.
Okay, thank you. So there can be some confusion. I think we've talked, a number of people have mentioned that the federal moratorium ends July 25th, so it has ended. But under that moratorium, there is a requirement that landlords have to give a 30-day notice that they're terminating the tenancy. So for anyone who is protected under the program, under the CARES Act, which would be any federal program, and the VAPAC has put together a fact sheet which has information about all the programs that are covered, and that has been posted on this website. So if somebody comes and says, well, they're no longer covered, they actually can't have an eviction filed until, from my understanding, until August 25th. There is even one exception that continues past that for evictions from foreclosed housing. If the foreclosure was a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac foreclosure, and then they're going to bring an eviction. And so that raises a question that Frank Ford had for Abigail as to, in the evictions that you've seen, have you had anywhere the landlord is attempting to evict a tenant while they're receiving Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan forbearance? And related, have you seen whether, in the other courts that within legal aid, are landlords identifying or certifying that they're not receiving forbearance or that their property is not under cares? So I'd also say, have you seen any tenants where a landlord actually was covered by the CARES moratorium and is not is trying to proceed on eviction inappropriately?
We haven't. We do screen for that. It's one of the first things we do when we get a case is to check to see as much as we can about the property. We haven't seen any cases where the landlord has received a forbearance so far, but it is also something that we try to investigate. We don't have that much time to do discovery in these cases, the ones that we've had so far. And so, sort of digging deeper, that would be one of the big questions we would ask in a discovery request. But I do think folks are looking into that, but we haven't seen it. I also think that, oh, go ahead.
No, please answer the question. I was just gonna say something about the moratorium, but go ahead.
And also, I think, courts are handling the initial sort of burden of presenting that information to the court differently. Some courts are, requiring that there's an attestation of some sort with the filing. Others will bring it up at the hearing. So I know that there are varying levels of inquiry with respect to different courts.
Just before you get to Beth, it should be noted that the Supreme Court has put together a disclosure form, which lists all the programs and is suggesting that courts actually require that landlords have to fill that out prior to filing. It's a little vague from what they're asking, whether they're mandating that or whether it's just a recommendation. So they have at least recognized that this is an important piece of information, because there's no way a tenant's going to know in most cases if there's a loan on the property, or the only thing they might know is if they're not paying their full rent and somebody else is supplementing it, that maybe there's government involvement, but they could be under other programs and project-based subsidies and never know it. So Beth, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was really remiss in not mentioning another important component of HEROES, which is the extension and expansion of the moratorium, the eviction moratorium. And what it would do is two things. One, it would extend the date until March 2021, anticipating that this crisis looks like it'll be with us for a while, and also expands it to the entire market, which would take out some of this guesswork about whether a tenant is or is not covered by the moratorium. And I know we've spoken with folks. Chuck and I were on a call the other day, and I know folks from the landlord community have some concerns about the moratorium. Senator Brown's taken the position that from a public health perspective, we can't really afford to have people evicted into the middle of a pandemic. It's not good for keeping them healthy, preventing transmission of COVID if people suddenly are in overcrowded situations or becoming homeless. And also, interestingly, at a hearing we had with the Federal Reserve chairman talked about how once people have been evicted, it's harder for them to become reemployed. And so whether you're caring about the public health recovery, the individual finances of families, or the economic recovery, avoiding widespread evictions is necessary. Of course, Senator Brown would pair the moratorium also with rental assistance so that we help landlords be able to meet their obligations as well. So sorry, should have mentioned that.
No problem. Thank you. We did have on the chat some discussion about that often if a tenant's having trouble with their rent, they also have trouble with utility assistance. And just to reiterate that is one of the things that is being screened for by CHN when a tenant is applying for rental assistance, and they also have programs to help provide for utility assistance, because it doesn't help to just pay the rent if you then don't have utilities. So just let me turn it over then to our panelists for any closing thoughts or comments about sort of where we are today, and as they would say, what keeps you up at night, and your concern is as we're moving forward, that we as a community need to think about. Anybody want to take a stab at that?
I'll go for it. What the heck? Plunge into the deep water, Phil? I'm good at that lately. Not always successfully. So I guess what keeps me up at night is the continuing need for a potential for like other rental assistance, and then also a pivot that we may need to make into foreclosure prevention. I think that a lot of banks and non-bank lenders had learned from the last crisis not to move too quickly as it relates to foreclosures, but as there is an extended economic crisis and non-payment, there may be a need for not a really a both and, not a one or the other. So that's one piece that is that's keeping me up at night. But I think the other thing, there's always light in times like this, and I just want to reiterate two things that I said. One, which the amount of collaboration between nonprofits and also between the levels of government as it relates to the rental assistance is something that we have never seen. And is just some real leadership, both in the government and nonprofit sector here in Northeast Ohio that has impressed the heck out of me. And then the second thing would be we have a unique opportunity in working with landlords, and I know Abby's spoken to this too, where, we can engage landlords in a different way than we have. Most oftentimes we see tenants, we see those who are in need as being the ones who are reaching out for help. But it is a win-win for a landlord to have housing stability for its residents. And, most landlords do not want to evict people, number one. But then number two, it's an economic win for them. We're a landlord. We have 2,200 units. It costs a lot more to evict someone and then have to replace them than not. So we have an opportunity to not be intrusive, not be threatening, but to help landlords and engage them in a different way and create a different muscle in our ecosystem than what we've seen before. So.
Anybody else?
I'll dive in too. I am really, really worried about meeting the need. When folks come to legal aid, they're on that brink between being housed and having stable housing right now and going forward, and entering into a world where once one has one eviction, they are more likely to have another eviction. They are more likely to have a difficult time finding new housing. They're going to have their applications turned down because of the eviction record. There's fallout that we've seen from the book Evicted, from the report that Case Western did. And the other sort of thing that just keeps bothering me is how much this is not people's fault. And this has been true ever since we've had a housing crisis. Being a low-income person isn't for lack of effort to try to find good employment or or some failing. This is just, it's a crisis, and here we have it amplified so much because of this terrible thing that is happening to the entire world. And what is going to happen is it is being borne on the brunt of our low-income populations when they are at risk of housing instability, when they have largely lost their jobs, because those are the jobs, that's the employment that closed down. Restaurants, taxis, Uber, airport usage, hotels, all of the industries that many people found their employment and their livelihood in. And if we don't, as a community, address their need, we are going to have such a huge crisis of housing on our shoulders. And I think it's on all of us to be communicating that to the world. So it remains really, really, really high on the priority of our policymakers, because all of these efforts from these people that are working together, until we stop this virus, it's not going to end then, but it will become less problematic. And so, I worry about sort of the big problem that we're facing right now and where it's going to go. I also just read an article in the New York Times that says that it is indeed an aerosol, or spread as an aerosol particle, which just is very scary. So.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Else, Chuck?
I just wanted to mention, from the standpoint of affordable housing, there just isn't enough affordable housing stock out there to make it reasonable for those people who are facing difficulties right now to, find decent, safe, clean, affordable housing. And it's very difficult for anyone who wants to develop affordable housing now, because you have to tear down existing housing to do it if you're going to do it in an urban area. And if you're going to do it in a suburban area, there are so many ordinances and things that would block someone from putting affordable housing in so many communities that could use it. Those communities are scared of having more affordable housing in their own communities. That's, from our perspective, the biggest problem is that once a tenant does get evicted, or if they're on the brink of getting evicted, being able to find some place to go that's decent and safe for them.
Yes, and this is just, as you're saying, I think exacerbated a problem that we've had for a long time, is that we do not, recognize the fact that if you start paying 50 or 60% of your income towards your rent, which a lot of people end up doing, that it really impacts, your life, and that you are oftentimes just one small financial crisis, whether it's a funeral or a health crisis, away from, being evicted and not being able to meet your obligations. And then we don't have appropriate resources. So, hopefully, what this crisis does is that we take the step back and we look at the actual needs that people have, is what it meant. People's lives would be certainly significantly different if we made sure that everybody had health care and everybody could pay a reasonable amount of their income, towards their housing. And that the reality is the only way that you can make some housing affordable is to make up that gap. So we've known for a long time in Cleveland that a shallow subsidy program could help a lot of people, between, bringing it down that you don't have to pay their full rent because they're out working, but they don't, having a living wage would certainly also help, towards meeting these needs. So there's an opportunity, in this crisis to look at very closely the type of issue that I think you've raised very importantly, that there isn't sufficient affordable housing, and that as a community and as a state and as a nation, we have a lot of work to do to ameliorate that problem. Thank you for those comments. Anyone else?
From the audience?
We'll take an audience comment.
All right, this is Joe Meisner. My latest thinking on the whole problem with Corona right now is it's not going to be short term. And I'm predicting like 5 years, and people may say, oh my God, no. But if we think that way, then we've got to figure solutions and help that will last through that entire period. People should realize, the last great big Spanish epidemic went 5 years, 1918 to 1923, and they never found a vaccine. But we got to think long term. I'm really happy the number of people have pointed that out. And Phil, I think you also pointed out that any programs or help that we come up with, you have to have the people like the tenants, and in our electric and gas situation, we actually have the customers in some way share in the solution. Simply to throw a lot of money at it, that may not really work out the best for anyone. But we've got to figure out ways of lasting for the next 5 years. And if it's less, we'll have a tremendous party in downtown Cleveland.
Okay. And it should be noted that it was just announced yesterday that I believe that the Trump administration has canceled the fair housing requirements for having strategies to affirmatively further fair housing, which we know also that one of the other problems for lower income is that it's hard to find housing closer to where jobs are being developed. And so rather than trying to solve some of the problems we now have another barrier that's been put forward. Rather than having communities work together to figure out how they meet those housing needs, that has been taken away. So there was a chat item that noted that, passing that on from Professor Ken Kowalski at Cleveland State University. Any other, from a panel, any other closing comments? Beth, were you?
Well, I just wanted to thank you for that comment, raising the AFFH affirmatively furthering fair housing rule. It's extremely disturbing what they've done, and I'm choking now, and especially the way the president has presented it as a way to exclude low-income people from communities. It's just extremely disturbing, and maintain segregation in our communities. It's disturbing.
I think, unfortunately, that's a good capitalization of what it really says and what it does, because it's very clear under our fair housing laws, anybody should be able to live wherever they choose. And this is basically saying there are a segment of the population that the president has suggested shouldn't be able to live where they want to live. So yes, it's very, very disturbing development. So I prefer to, on that note, I think it indicates that from what we've heard about, what keeps people up at night, that I don't believe I missed anybody else who wanted to comment. If any of the other panelists have anything they want to say, please just jump in. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it back to Chip for a closing comment, but I would just like to thank our panelists for sharing both their time and their expertise and giving us a really good sense of kind of where we are today and where the challenge is. And obviously, we're probably going to have to revisit this issue. I think we're very fortunate in Cuyahoga County that both the city of Cleveland, Mayor Frank Jackson and his administration and the county have come up with resources that at the present time are meeting some of the needs and challenges that we have, and that there are some funds available. But it's very scary looking forward with unemployment, the extra compensation ending at the end of this week, as to people are going to be in very, very difficult positions. And with the spiking of the virus, it's pretty clear that the economy is just not going to get rolling again. So in terms of people being able to return to work and have income to cover their rent. And I think that the next big wave is going to be around mortgages and the same type of situation we saw in 2008. And hopefully we have better solutions this time to help preserve housing stability and keeping people in their homes so they don't lose their homes. So further moratoriums are needed. Clearly, action on the federal level for significant sums. I think that Cleveland and the county basically have tapped out the types of monies that they have to meet these needs, and we really need Washington to step in and provide some assistance. So glad to have both of the representatives, our senators, online indicating their support for eviction for rental assistance and making sure that we have, we're focusing on those problems going forward, and all the agencies in Cleveland that have come together and working together to address this problem. So I thank all the panelists, and I'll turn it over to Chip if he has a closing comment.
Sure, Phil. Thank you so much. Terrific forum. Heartfelt thinking about the problems we have with poor people. I think the biggest chart I saw was the effect on African Americans in terms of evictions. I think that was in the Cleveland Housing Network. Kevin, that was terrific stuff. I want to mention that we are going to continue to do these forums. They're all going to be virtual. And one of our next looks may be looking at banking. Frank Ford and a number of us have worked very closely looking at key bank and reinvestment strategies through the county. We also are thinking about other ideas that you may have. So on the electronic evaluation, if you want to fill that out and you have a suggestion for a topic, feel free to do it. Try to stay on top of these issues. We'll be posting all the information from this forum on our website at Organize Ohio, and it's under Forums, Ohio Fair Lending. And thank you all for participating. We had a very large audience, and I'm surprised, even from our days of being at CSU, we're topping out with a larger number of people participating through our Zoom method. So once again, thank you all. Appreciate it. Thanks to our planning committee. Thanks to all of our sponsors. And thanks to you who are out there doing this hard work. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.